Good afternoon, everybody. May whatever I say here today be of immense benefit to all of us, and may whatever I may say here, utter or spill, be of bring distance all of us from suffering. After that being said, I think I can say almost anything. Public speaking, I fear a lot usually, and one of the worst fear during a public talk is how to ignore the listeners yawning or dozing off. But I will try my best. So the topic being happiness, I try to put some funny images, as I might call, into the slides, and I hope you will find them funny. I was known among my friends as great at making jokes that are not funny. So first of all, I would like to say thank you very much to Kishila, to the director, and Brycela, and everyone who is concerned with organizing this wonderful conference, this interaction between the Buddhist monks and scientists, philosophers, and thinkers. And I think I will, go down to my core subject, happiness. So as you can see on the slide, as happiness is when we are finally aware of the leaves rustling and see the beauty of or in it. Well, that's just sort of analogy. What it actually I'm trying to sort of illustrate here is happiness is when, as I think Professor Mukhopadhyay said, that from day one, that when everything is in harmony, when your mental state as well as physical state is quite in harmony, you will be able to be aware of the surroundings and see the beauties of the details in our surroundings. And so happiness is, even though there are many levels, especially from a Buddhist point of view, there are many subtle levels of happiness. This is one of the one I'm trying to say. I'm trying to illustrate here is the one of the thing that is illustratable. There are many other levels of happiness which is unillustratable, and so basically, happiness is when, as I said on the day one, harmony brings happiness, and when the wholeness of your body and mind, the mental state as well as the physical state, and everything is in harmony, then happiness comes. So this is, my brief sort of introduction on happiness. And so in Buddhism, we always talk about cause and effect. And the cause for happiness is not something ready-made, or it's not out there by itself. It's not automatic. Happiness comes from your own actions. Happiness comes from your own actions when you are true to yourself, to others, and when you are true to others as well as yourself, and when you are sincere, and when your mental state, speech, your mind, your speech, as well as your actions are sincere and true, then happiness can be generated, or happiness will follow through. And some thoughts on happiness from ancient tradition, that is Master Shantideva, who has been quite popular the last few days. So he says that even though we all wanted to get rid of suffering, we would rush towards suffering. And though we want happiness, due to ignorance, we try to vanquish our happiness as if it's our worst enemy. What he's saying here is, of course, I think, what he's trying to say here is we are due to our ignorance, we do not recognize the cause of suffering, or we can say cause of happiness, and cause of happiness, and you can also say we do not know what happiness actually is, because we do not know the nature of happiness or happiness itself. We also confuse with the cause of happiness, and ignorance actually plays a very big role in all the problems. From a Buddhist point of view, that's how we explain, but it is not just because you are a Buddhist or not. Ignorance, I think, brings suffering in reality, for real. And so, yes, to get rid of suffering, as Master Shantideva was pointing out here, you need to know what is happiness, which is the opposite of suffering. The suffering is opposite of the happiness. So you need to know. You can say that to recognize what happiness is, you actually need to know what is behind, or what is at the back of that thing called happiness, suffering. In other words, you need to recognize happiness correctly, accurately. You need to know what suffering is. And unless you have any idea of what suffering is or what caused suffering, it will be difficult, almost impossible to bring happiness, you can say. There are many levels of happiness. So for any level of happiness, there is sort of a adversarial suffering there. So when you know that adversarial kind of suffering, counterpart, you can say, on the back, like a back of a coin. So when you know that suffering, and when you are able to get rid of that suffering, the happiness sort of automatically jumps in, like a balance, like a scale. Happiness and unhappiness or suffering are like two balance on a scale. So when you, I think I made myself clear. And so that's basically what I was saying about happiness. And for those who do not know, the person holding the tablet is the creator of, you can say creator of iPad. And and what he, I read somewhere that there are 600,000 apps in iPad, and I don't know how many of them are necessary, really necessary for in our life. So what this is trying to say is, to gain happiness, we go after a lot of things that we thought or we think that will bring happiness, but in actuality it does not. Like money, for example. We work so hard for money, which is actually we work so hard for money in order to become happy, but we become unhappy by not getting enough money. enough wealth. So this is what Shantideva is talking about by, hurriedly rushing towards suffering. Hurriedly rushing towards suffering. I think that's a good point because of the, the rat race we have in this world. Currently, we are having in this world. So, so we are rushing towards things that will cause unhappiness, believing that this will bring us happiness. So, yeah, and yeah, this is supposed to be an example. Okay, so I sort of a way towards happiness, but it's very basic. But yeah, on a societal level as well as a personal level, I've made two graphs. So on a societal level, I think when you have a problem, the opposite of happiness. When you have certain suffering, when you have a certain problem which brings suffering, so when you have that suffering, when you have that unhappiness, when you have that problem, the way towards solving it at a societal level, it would be, from my point of view, firstly, gathering the right information on the sources of all the unhappiness or problems, as we say in our daily life, getting the right information from. It is in our Buddhist practice, we call it recognizing the cause of suffering, and I think that is one key point. And then after, when you are able to pinpoint or source out the cause of all the unhappiness or problems that you are facing at a societal level, then I think you need to discuss the best and the most amicable way to solve it. It is nothing new. I think most of us are doing it almost all the time. Actually, we have been doing that for the last 3 days. And yes, and yeah. So the reason I'm pointing it out here, panning out these 3 lines, is it would differ a little bit from happiness, the way towards happiness on a personal level. So the third one is when you have sourced out the cause of the unhappiness or problems or suffering, then and after much discussion and finding a suitable way to solve it, what you have to do is you have to solve it. What we lack in our society is we would say we used to say there are not many intellectuals or whatever, but I think there are so many intellectuals, but there are less practitioners, I would say. What has been sort of panned out by the intellectuals, the paths or the ways, the methods panned out by the intellectuals were not really acted upon by the practitioners, by the general society. Like we are more of a intellectual. We are more of a complainer. We are more of a but we are less practitioner. Not in the sense of Buddhist spiritual practitioner, but in many problems in our society, we know about the of how to solve these problems. For example, like the global warming, like that. For example, we know, actually almost all of us know somewhat little bit about how to solve it. But what happens is, from a very personal level, not just to an industrial scale, but on a very personal level, those things we do know, we do not practice. Like switching off the lights when we go out of our room. And then I think that is how we so unsuccessfully try to reach for happiness. And there are two ways of looking at this picture, describing this picture. One is happiness is out there, and gathering all sort of materials or external factors to increase your happiness or get happiness, become happy. And the other thing is, that is going for the external thing. And then the other thing is searching for happiness externally or internally, but going for the wrong causes. As we talk about, as cause and effect is very important in our tradition, in our philosophy. Without cause, there's no effect. Without seed, there's no apple. Without apple, seed. So cause of happiness. What we try to we try to look for happiness externally. That's one thing, and we also try to look for happiness internally, but where it isn't there. One good example might be grudge. When we have animosity towards someone else, we hold grudge so that we may take revenge someday or whatever, and we feel like by avenging that whatever harm was done to you or your close will help you, or it seems like it brings some sort of satisfaction, contentment when you are able to avenge them, but what follows is disasters. So that is, like grudge is inside, it's not outside. Grudge, it's inside, but with grudge, like holding a grudge and confusing or believing it to bring some sort of happiness, which bring contentment and satisfaction. You may call it loyalty. You may call it, there are a lot of things like that. Honor. You may call it loyalty. Because of loyalty, you want to avenge somebody. Because of honor, you want to avenge somebody, but it does not bring you happiness. So this one is very. This is by one Bengali filmmaker named Rinpoche Mukherjee. I guess maybe he paraquoted, paraquoted it from Rabindranath Tagore, which was the author of Indian anthem, the national anthem. So whatever, this was in his movie, which is a very famous movie called Bawarchi, meaning the cook. So he says, it's so simple to be happy, as you can read here. So what he's trying to say here, I think, I found this in line with what Mahatma Gandhi also said, simple living, high thinking. And also in Buddhist terms, we have, for a monk, we have this thing called Tunyua, Chawanyua. Its meaning means less, how do you say, less work, less fuss, something like that. So what it's trying to say here is, this is kind of a minimalistic approach towards life, or can you say reductionist? I don't know. The whole idea is being happy or being content with what you have, not going after things that you may not be able to achieve or you do not have. So I think I need to rush. Oh yeah, I think this was illustrated. This was spoken out by fresco yesterday, David, and so you can read it yourself. So one key thing I want to point out from this thing is it says focus on what's important. So regarding lots of things in life, like materials, and especially information, since this is what we are talking about the whole day, the whole 3 days. The information that you try to catch in, that you try to sort of sip in, should be something that should be helpful towards you, or that it should be something that is helpful towards you, or it should be something that is conducive to your happiness. And perhaps that's just a Buddhist point of view, or maybe everybody wants to be happy. So on a personal level, so I'm not gonna talk on the first two. It's so on the third the third point, as I don't have much time, I'm gonna skip to the third point. On the societal level, I said you should not accept it. You should sort of when you have a problem, you should discuss it and then work on it. And on a personal level, on an individual level, I think when you have some sort of unhappiness, when some misfortune befalls you, I think you have to accept it first. You call it fate or whatever, or if there is like a lot of there is degradation in the road system or your municipality or whatever, then you can call it lack of collaboration or this or that, but accept it. Accepting whatever problem that comes to you, accepting a problem is the first thing. Many a times what happens is problems always comes into our life. What happens is we try to ignore it, we don't accept it, we try to brush it aside, put it on the carpet, and what happens is the problem aggravates. So, the summary, though in no way can we ignore or deny the necessity of external tools to generate happiness, true happiness comes from contentment, love, respect, appreciation, and acceptance. And thank you.
Tatanda Rinpoche songa la karsa dewa di ani suzuki ni ngoshawa che gore tende chi songsa songse na kamai na di degi gi de di shimene ga dewa di suzu ngoshawa che gore shimene ga di deshite jaro ji da ga.
He asked, how do you recognize happiness, as I just said. So basically what I'm saying here is, when I said recognizing happiness, I'm by quoting Shantideva, what I'm trying to say is you need to know the causes of happiness. And yes, and happiness itself as well. When something makes you happy, but it sort of makes the other person uneasy or unhappy, I don't think you can call that true happiness. But it can be because of his or her jealousy, that's another matter. But from a Zen perspective, if somebody else has a negative effect from my happiness, so and so happiness, I think you cannot. It should not be defined as happiness.
Thank you very much. If we love to be happy, why are we running away from it? And if it is not something to be gained from external circumstances, objects, etc., why is it not available with us all the time?
There is a true sort of a prefix there. I think by true happiness, I mean what we usually say like everlasting happiness. Maybe there's no such thing as everlasting, but since everything is impermanent and changes. But happiness, when we talk about happiness in a truer sense, I think it is derived not from external factors. Take for an example a rishi, a meditator, a sage living up high up in the Himalayan mountains, not just here, but in the, let's say, in the snowy mountains, without anything, just loincloth and maybe something to eat, maybe not. And I think he has happiness. And then there can be lots of billionaires or millionaires filled with gold and this and that or whatever, still not getting happiness. So in a truer sense, as well as the source of happiness, I do not think is external factors.
I would say too, just to piggyback, I have had patients with major depression who have told me that there's something enjoyable about being sad, that there's something that scares them about changing and being happy. And it's a little shocking because, they continue to come to therapy and they continue to work with me to find happiness, yet they're terrified of changing or of being happy. And when I asked one of my clients patients why this is, she told me that falling from happiness is more painful than staying sad.
I think again, there is, as I said, there are levels of happiness, and I would like to narrate a story. Like 2 or 3 years ago, back, my youngest brother, it was on the New Year's Eve, on the New Year's Day, so he said, "I'm gonna wish you a new year, but I'm not gonna say Happy New Year, because I don't know whether you want happiness or something else." So I think it makes sense, because I don't know from our West, from the Asian or Oriental point of view, but in the West, I think we would celebrate tragicness. Like, for example, Shakespeare is renowned for his tragic stories or things like that. I mean, we go to, let's say we go to see horror movies, we go to see sad movies, and we read movies novels that have very sad endings. We enjoy them. And you can say enjoy, but not happiness, really. So, yeah.
So when you talk about the true happiness, so actually I wonder, what do you mean by that? Did you mean something, when you are completely free from all the suffering? Or if that was the case, then it is possible to gain that kind of true suffering as a sentient being. Yeah, true happiness, I'm sorry.
Okay, so first since this is a very tricky question, what is true happiness? I will go by negating what is not. So true happiness is not listening to music, good or bad sound, or having tasty food, or living in a warm house when it's cold outside, or air-conditioned room when it's hot outside. I think it's none of these. And so true happiness, you can say it's irrespective of what is happening outside. Whether it's cold, hot, tasty food, non-tasty food, delicious, non-delicious, good smell, bad smell, whatever. You are aware of all this. You have to be aware. It's not like you are dull or feeling numb. Your senses are numb to all this thing. You have to be aware of all the surroundings, be aware of it, be able to enjoy it, or be able to appreciate, recognize it as it is, suffering or whatever, and then being unmoved by it. That is happiness, true happiness.
So I actually have a follow-up question on that. Do you have any suggestions for how we as scientists could potentially measure happiness? I mean, what does it look like? Do happy people display some kind of behavior? Because actually in the things we've talked about so far, the only way we've discussed for measuring happiness is just asking people basically, are you happy? But could you think of any other ways?
I may sort of answer with a counter question. I think Matthew Ricard was known as the happiest person in the world. How was that measured? As well as how do Bhutan measure their gross national happiness level? Since this is a scientific sort of thing, I don't have an answer from a Buddhist point of view for that. But how is that done? Like for Bhutan, they have GHP instead of GDP. So how is that done? And how did you measure Matthew Ricard?
To attempt to answer that question. I'm not sure about Bhutan because I'm not an expert on that. I do know how Mathieu Ricard was measured, and I don't think all scientists agree that that's a good definition of happiness, but they compared some amplitude of brain waves in the left and right part of his brain. Personally, I would think that I have a bias for observing behavior, and maybe, we could come up with tasks in which we look at how people react to certain stimuli, maybe, of food or other things, and could we say something about happiness, or where they look, how they move their eyes? Anyway, just some thoughts.
Can I respond to that for maybe a minute? I feel in life, perhaps sometimes it's better that we keep a few things which cannot be measured. That will definitely lead us to happiness. And the other response is, sometimes, very important fundamental states of being like happiness cannot be measured with the use of numbers, but it can be measured by qualities. So these many qualities you have, then you can know how much happy you are. So that's one way of looking at it.
Thank you for your talk. I've been trying to work out my personal definition of happiness, and I think I've come up with, for now, happiness is not being eaten by a lion. So, no, and I mean this, there's a term in Western science called adaptation, and this is, and we talk about this in two ways. We see species adapt to their environments and they change biologically, and this is really notable with the species that are endemic to the Galapagos, and they've changed because of living in the Galapagos. So we talk about behavioral adaptation, where we see all the cues for reward. We find the beautiful papaya tree, and we find the best ripe fruit on the tree, and we know what it looks like, and we know how to pick it, and we know where not to come across a pride of lions so they eat us. So I think happiness is accurately seeing the environment without any delusion, and having a broad and flexible repertoire of behaviors that allow us both to nourish ourselves and to protect ourselves when true dangers are present.
Mm-hmm. Being happy and happiness is quite different. So being happy, I think this is what you just described. This is my point of view. So what you just described, I would set it aside as being happy, and happiness is something else. Happiness, I think, is like I described earlier, from my point of view, like negating all this thing and being irrespective of good things or bad things, whatever happens to you, being aware of everything, being able to appreciate and also criticize, criticize if there is something like, it smells bad. You have to be, you are not numb, right? And being able to be that, you're not in a vegetative state, you are aware of everything, but still unmoved by it. I think I would say that is happiness.
So one quick response. I wonder if there's an assumption in the definition of happiness that we're working with right now, that happiness is the absence of any effort, the absence of any sweat, the absence of any discomfort at all. I still think that you know, especially we've been talking a lot about the interdependence of things. We must be organisms in the world, in the environment, and there are these both rewards and pitfalls in the environment that are inherent. And I think happiness is not stepping in the hole and having enough of a reach for the things that make our lives better.
That I do agree.
I'll bring another dimension in this happiness. Happiness belongs to self. And when this self is comfortable with its value system, this self is happy. What disturbs this value system of self is information and phenomena. External information and external phenomena, which disturbs my value system. When self is comfortable with his value system, that gives you happiness. And it has been seen also, those who are obsessed with this happiness, they're the most miserable people. You have to go, whether I am happy or unhappy, I have to do my duties, I have to do my things, and when you do your things, you will feel more happy. But if you are always obsessed with this happiness in your psychology, you will be the most miserable person. You know, consciousness is insensitive to everything else. Just like brain itself is not sensitive to pain, cut, mark, or any injury. Brain itself is insensitive. Similarly, consciousness is also insensitive. But it feels happy when somebody surrenders to it. When somebody surrenders to consciousness, consciousness is very happy. Yes, blessed you are. So happiness has different levels, and on the value system, it depends.
I would say too, on the idea of value systems, that we do have some evidence for this, that there's people are happier when there's less of a discrepancy between their actions and their ideals, or their values and the way that they behave on a regular basis. And so minimizing that discrepancy is one of the major goals of a lot of the psychotherapies that we do. The other evidence that we have is that people who say that they value happiness, it's one of their core values, are less happy.
I may have sort of maybe a statement, I don't know what it will come down to. So talking about value system, like sort of evaluating happiness through our value system. There are different value systems, isn't it? Like in some traditions it is considered good or right to be cautious, respectful, and all these things. Respectful, not very much, but cautious, and being formal and things like that, like in Japan. And in some societies, it is considered better, or right, not to be that formal, because by being formal, you are concealing your true emotions. So when somebody shows cautiousness, can you say courtesy towards you, to some people they might be happy. To some people, showing courtesy and all these things will make them not so happy, feel like, oh, they are concealing something like that. So how do you sort of differentiate or whatever, like compare these two things? I mean, because there are different value systems. So how would you evaluate happiness through a different value system?